Hi everyone. This is what happened to me when I got government housing part 106, and I've been telling you guys that I was going to tell you about the final hearing for a long time, and as it turns out, it has taken me over a year to tell my story. And if you watch my videos from part 1 of what happened to me when I got government housing, you'll see that that's probably because a lot of things happened to me, and I suffered immensely because of the things that happened to me. And I tried to get help from people who worked in the justice system, both the public servants and the private sector. None of them helped, and also I was treated pretty badly by people who worked in the justice system as well. I did my best to tell my story to all of you guys, and I hope that if anyone has any questions about anything that I've told you, that you ask me in the comments, and I can do my best to tell you what I think. Bearing in mind that everything I say in these videos is my opinion, because unfortunately, the way things work in our society is that even if something happens to you, if you talk about it on camera and it hasn't been proven in court, you can get called a liar. I don't want to be called a liar. I have done my best to prove things to you guys, or to give as much information as I safely can, to make sure that if anyone who is evil enough to dispute what I'm saying, that they can actually go and check their facts before, saying anything about it. I don't know if anyone's made any videos to try to counter what I'm saying. I certainly haven't seen any, but obviously I wanted to tell you guys my story, and now we're up to the final hearing. So I've told everyone about what happened to me, and the first incident of what happened to me was all the way back in 2015, when the respondent threw a punch at me, which was, he actually aimed for my mouth area, looked at my mouth, and actually tried to punch me in the mouth. So I would have lost my teeth if he had successfully done that. From that point, I knew that that person was willing to assault me. Um, and they did that in broad daylight in front of witnesses. So I also knew that it appeared that they felt that they could get away with it. And then there was a lot of other incidents after that as well. And then there was the fact that people refused to help me, and that was distressing as well. And then there was the fact that when I was in the courthouse, uh, people ranging from the lowest court staff all the way up to judges treated me unfairly. I'm not saying all of them did, but some of them definitely did. I think, their behavior towards me was outrageous, basically. Outrageous, wrong. And the funny thing about being in court is that, as far as I'm aware, there are some behaviors that appear to be illegal or punishable by jail, it seems. I know you can get kicked out of the courtroom, because that's being threatened to me just for simply, talking, or, defending myself, or refusing to play along with um, the disgusting behavior of lawyers in the courtroom, some of whom expect to walk over the top of me and get away with it. And yeah, so when you're dealing with people in the courthouse, if you're actually on the stand, it seems that if you argue, or talk back, I definitely didn't try, being as rude as they were. If you argue or talk back, you get threatened with being kicked out. And obviously there's contempt of court, and apparently, the judge that heard my final hearing repeatedly said, "I'm warning you," when he was talking to me. So I don't know if he was hoping to put me in jail for something that I would say. I have no idea. But um, everyone knows that I suffered various assaults, and these ranged from, having buckets of water dumped on me, to, that person trying to punch me in the face, driving a vehicle into me, him or someone related to him, or someone not related to him shot at my window, and someone smashed in my washing machine, someone cut the cord on my dryer, someone placed that cord across the path to my front door so I would see it, as a form of psychological menacing, and there was a lot of psychological menacing as well on top of that. And then on top of all of that, I had people making reports about me to child protection, which may or may not have been warranted in, that case. I mean, the allegations that they were making about me were untrue, but I mean, if someone had have said this person is suffering and they really need help, and that was their report to child protection, obviously I would agree with that. I would say that that may have been warranted, but I don't think the reports that were made about me were true, and I don't think that they were warranted. And I definitely don't think I deserved the response that I got from child protection, because that was really violent and really distressing. And that had, an effect on the way me and my daughter saw each other, because my daughter was constantly witnessing people being rude to me and people being hard on me and people accusing me of things. And obviously, that affected my relationships with a lot of people, and my situation at present is affected by the way people in the justice system have treated me as well, for reasons that I won't discuss in this video, but we'll do it in another video. So this video is about the final hearing, but it won't be the last video, because I still have more things to tell you guys. I've been waiting so long to tell this video, and to tell you guys about what happened. And I hope that everyone gets the opportunity to watch all of the parts of my story so you understand what happened to me before I got to the final court hearing. So I live in Melbourne, which is in Victoria, in Australia. And when you live in Melbourne, there is like several magistrates' courts, and the courthouse that I attended was the Melbourne Magistrates Court. And I'm sorry that the lighting looks a bit weird. I've actually got a light shining in my face, but for some reason I'm still coming up as like really blurry. So I apologize for that. But anyway, when you make an application for compensation, you make that application to a place called VOCAT. VOCAT is the Victims of Crime Assistance Tribunal, and that is just simply a courtroom that you attend. You go to the Melbourne Magistrates Court. You tell the person that, like, at the desk that you're there for your hearing, and you go into one of the courtrooms, and that's your VOCAT hearing. Your VOCAT hearing is your compensation hearing. And as you know, every lawyer that I approached refused to represent me. And that is something that I'll mention again when I talk about the court hearing. But basically, at the start of this series, I told you guys that my application was refused. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't see the point of saying, I was assaulted, my washing machine was smashed in, he drove a vehicle into me, and going on all that time and then saying, oh, and guess what? My application was refused. We already know my application was refused. I wanted to let everyone know that from the outset. But I didn't just want to say my application was refused and I was treated badly. I wanted everyone to know the details of what happened to me, because I wasn't just assaulted by that man. I was verbally assaulted by his lawyer. And, I was treated badly by other people in the justice system. And, I was refused assistance by a whole heap of people who are, paid full time to help people. And I hope that everyone can listen to my story, and maybe, like, if you can recognize something in what I'm saying, and obviously this does not only happen to me. If these people can get away with, like, refusing to assist me and refusing to do the job, clearly they do it to other people. So I would say, I would encourage anyone, if you recognize anything in my story that has happened to you, I would say, you need to come forward and tell your story as well, because people need to know. A lot of things that have happened to me over the course of my adult life have told me that, you know, you don't you don't really get help, because people are adamant that you get help from your local MP, and people are adamant that, if you can afford a lawyer, things can be fixed. But the fact is that if judges in courtrooms can see a person telling the truth, such as myself, who was, and still rule against them, then clearly there is no magic bullet. There is no solution. There are some times where injustice happens and there appears to be nothing you can do about it. However, I get the opportunity to talk about what happened to me on social media, and I'm really grateful for that. And as I've said before, I intend to do another video series about paths to justice and the way that social media has helped me, because it has. And I want to show my gratitude for the opportunity that social media has given me, because um, the social media apps and the social media platforms deserve my gratitude. If it wasn't for social media, literally no one would know my story. And that's a fact. People have a fantasy that if you can get hold of a journalist, or, people have a fantasy that when something bad happens to them, it will be so apparent and so obvious that all you need to do is get hold of Channel 7 or Channel 9 or some journalist from somewhere, and they'll take you under their wing and everything will be okay and the public will be outraged. But they're not. I mean, look at what happened to me. You know, um, the fact is that not only did I do all of those things and make some effort to contact the mainstream media, but I, you know, was not helped by them, and no one was willing to take on my story. So I was able to turn to social media, and people need to give credit to social media for the power that it gives the individual and for the opportunity for justice that it gives people, because social media was literally my only opportunity to get the truth out. I was willing to tell the truth when I attended my VOCAT hearing, but no one was willing to listen to me. Um, and the really strange thing is that I made efforts to contact and inform people at all levels of the public service, whether it be from the lowest levels, all the way up to MPs. And I didn't get through to any of them. And I think that's because of, you know, various things that happen, like, for example, discrimination against me personally, and then, broader discrimination against lower class people. I think that if I was a woman in different circumstances, I would have been treated differently. But the fact is that I'm a single mother living in government housing, and and that appears to have affected the way that people perceive me, and not just the way people perceive me, but what they think they can get away with. Um, there are some people who are so audacious towards me that they openly admit that they don't care, that they know what happened to me was wrong. They know that I was telling the truth. They know that I suffered injustice when I wasn't awarded compensation, and they don't care because there's nothing I can do about it. They know that I'm powerless. They know that they can walk over the top of me because they know I can't afford a lawyer. But the only thing that I can do is go to social media and tell my story and tell the truth. And that is something quite different. I'm lucky that I'm at an age where I have seen the development of social media, and I have watched uh, the way it has changed and the usability become easier and easier, and people's access become easier. So there are other things that happened to me before we had social media. And back then, when they happened, I really wanted to tell people about them. And I wanted help and I wanted justice. But I didn't get that because we didn't have social media back then. And I had no support. And I had no money back then because I've always been lower class. Um, but so now I have social media. This is why I've chosen to come forward and tell my story. I think some people wonder why I would be telling everyone this, given that I'm not getting any money out of it. And it is hard, not, excuse me, not getting paid for these videos is hard, but it doesn't change the fact that I know I'm lucky to have the opportunity to tell my story. Okay, so I just wanted to start out by explaining to you guys everything that happened and my motivation because, believe it or not, even though what happened to me is quite horrible, the process of telling you all was not humiliating. I am so grateful to have social media and to be able to tell my story. And I'm really grateful for anyone else who is able to come forward and tell that these things have happened to them as well. And I'll get going with my story now. And I hope you guys can tell me what you think in the comments. Okay, so now I wanted to start telling you about the hearing itself. My compensation hearing was on the 7th of the 5th, 2018. And I had my hearing at the Melbourne Magistrates Court, which is in William Street in Melbourne, in Victoria, Australia. Those hearings are recorded. They've got sound recording equipment and they've also got cameras in the room. And I would like the Melbourne Magistrates Court to release the video of that hearing so everyone can see what happened to me on that day. Okay, so just to explain what happened is that I made an application for compensation because of all the assaults that I suffered. I also wanted to be reimbursed for expenses that I incurred. Like, for example, because my washing machine was smashed in, an expense that I incurred was having to wash my clothes at the laundrette. And also, I bought myself a little hand washer to use at home that I could keep in my backyard, and I didn't have to put in the laundry where I would risk having it damaged. The other thing is that I wanted to be reimbursed for things like paper because my evidence, by the end of it was around 100 pages long. And one of the problems that I had is that the judges, you know, casually say, provide 3 copies of that to whoever or provide copies of that to whoever. So 100 pages times 3 is 300 pages. And when you have court hearing after court hearing after court hearing, and it's all different people that you're dealing with, you're ending up having to print a lot. What happened to me is that I didn't want to print out my evidence at a public printing place, so I printed it at home. The printer that I had was an inkjet printer, and ink at that time was $118 for a full set of cartridges. And I went through several of those, printing out my evidence at home. So that was quite a bit of money, and that was a lot of money that was taken out of my pension money and that I should have been able to spend on myself. These expenses and others pushed me into extreme poverty and forced me to do things like ask the Salvation Army for food vouchers and go to food banks for food. That's what I was forced to do because of the expenses that I incurred, for washing my clothes and for doing administrative tasks. When, so I made the application for compensation to the court. So regarding actually going there, like for the court hearing, I'll tell you guys about that and then we can, get into the other details later. And obviously, all of you can ask me any questions that you've got. So I had to attend the court hearing. And the court hearing started at around 10 a.m. and it didn't finish till about 3:30 p.m. So I attended the hearing and there was a judge and the respondent and the respondent's lawyer in the courtroom. And as it turned out, and I didn't know before I walked into the room, it turned out to be a 3-against-1 virtual beating that I suffered for the entire day. It was a really, really horrible experience. And when I filled out my application form, I stipulated that I didn't want to attend a hearing, that I wanted the application to be heard in my absence, and they can do that. They can like look over the application and then just write to you and say it's refused or tell you what your compensation award is. But they didn't do that with me. They forced me to attend a hearing. And the lawyer that was representing the respondent was the same person who yelled at me until I burst into tears. So I didn't want to see him. And obviously, I didn't want to see the respondent. And I didn't want to spend a whole day sitting in the same room as the respondent. I mean, that was so horrible. It was a horrible thought. It was horrible for me to have to imagine going into the courtroom and going through. And when it actually happened, it was really horrible. I mean, and he enjoyed watching me being yelled at and being treated badly by, I'm saying that I was treated badly by the judge and by the respondent's lawyer. And, clearly, if anyone thinks otherwise, they can publish the video online and, the whole world can see what they think of it. So the court hearing was pretty horrible. What happened was that when I went in there, I had prepared my case. I never went to court just expecting to turn up and say, point the finger and say that person did these things to me and I want compensation. I was prepared to read out my evidence and I was prepared to speak as I am speaking now. And I was prepared to show all of the receipts that I had. And I was prepared to show photos and videos of incidents and of, things that happened. The things that happened to me were pretty disgusting and pretty graphic. Like, photos of having my washing machine smashed in, are clearly an act of violence. The black paint that was thrown on my bra, that was a very violent act and it was a very, very graphic act. And then there was the fact that I was willing and able to be questioned. I had suffered immensely over the 3 years that I had waited to go into that court hearing, but I was still willing to be questioned because I was so desperate to get compensated for what happened to me because I wanted to make things better for myself and for my daughter. And obviously, what I wanted more than anything was just to buy food and wash my clothes in the same way that everyone else does. I didn't, and I also made a point of blowing up the photos of the evidence that I had to A4 size so I could hold them up when I was presenting my case. And they were labeled and my evidence was clearly spelt out. And then on top of that, I had to provide CDRs of the videos. And on top of that, I had to go in there with my laptop. I had to provide CDRs of all the videos of the incidents to the respondent's lawyer and to the court, and obviously I had to have them myself. And that was like another expense, and that took a lot of time to do that. There was a lot of hard work involved in preparing my case and in setting everything out. And I intended to go into the courtroom and explain what happened to me and present my evidence. Obviously, that's why I prepared it. And I believed that I would attend court and that I would be listened to. And obviously, because I knew that I was telling the truth, I expected to get compensation. And I thought that if I got the worst judge in the world, that I would at least get a few $1,000s compensation because what happened to me was so, you know, it was, I felt that it was basically obvious that I was telling the truth. And it was obvious that I had suffered a lot of violence because I had photos and videos of that. And it's also true that I had received compensation for when a tiny amount of compensation, I think it was like, I don't know, maybe $100, something like that, because he drove a vehicle into me. Um, and what can I say? So I intended to you know, speak my case and you know, I believe that I would be treated with courtesy and respect, and I wasn't. And on top of all of that, I went to the courthouse with my daughter because my daughter had seen me suffer over the years and had seen me treated badly and had seen the police argue with me and turn up when I reported incidents and just, you know, piss off without doing anything. So I brought her with me because I wanted her to see me win and I wanted her to see the court process and I wanted her to see fairness and justice. And that's not what happened. The judge was really rude to me and he was rude to my daughter. The judge glared at my daughter in a really offensive way. I don't know what was going on in his mind when he did that, but I found it really offensive. And I can't believe that someone would behave like that towards a child. Um, what happened when I went in there is that the respondent's lawyer was spoken to before I was spoken to, even though I was the applicant. Excuse me. And I was there to present my case, but I was treated like I was on trial. And I was there to present my case, but the respondent's lawyer was allowed to direct the proceedings. And he did. And I believe he lied about me in the court hearing, and he also talked about me in the court hearing as if he knew me and as if he had a right to talk about me, and he had no right to talk about me. He talked about me personally, and he said things about me like I was on the stand and the judge was in front of me, the respondent's lawyer was here, and he would say things like, "Oh, she, she." It was so pompous and so arrogant and so rude and so wrong. He didn't know me. I don't know the respondent's lawyer. He doesn't know me, but he treated me like he knew me and he treated me like he hated me and he treated me like he had a right to speak on my behalf. And I have never, ever given that man any right to speak on my behalf. I think if anyone gets hold of the court hearing and they watch that you will see that and you will agree with what I'm saying. So when I was in the courtroom initially, the respondent's lawyer took control of the hearing and the judge appeared to passively accept that. And he also appeared to have a problem with me personally from the outset. And I didn't know him either. I had never come before that judge before, and I've never met him personally, never worked with him professionally, never dealt with him in a courthouse before. But he appeared to have a problem with me. He sneered at me his tone of voice was offensive. The way he treated me was offensive. It was rude. It was harsh. It was completely unnecessary. And the respondent's lawyer was the same rude, arrogant bastard who yelled at me until I burst into tears. The respondent's lawyer is a really disgusting person. I think he's really unethical, and I also believe that he lied about me. And I don't know where he got the idea that he could talk about me, and I don't know where he's getting his information from. And if he got that information from the respondent, I don't know why he was stupid enough to believe what the respondent was saying about me. So the respondent's lawyer was asked by the judge how he would like to proceed. And those two seemed to think that I was on trial, and I wasn't. I was a single woman in a compensation court asking for compensation. And not only that, but I had my daughter there. And they treated me very rudely in front of my daughter. They were rude to me, which was unforgivable, and they were rude to me in front of my daughter, which is also unforgivable. I don't know why it was necessary to be that disgustingly rude to me. And the fact that they were willing to treat me like that in front of my daughter is outrageous. So they proceeded. I was told to take the stand virtually as soon as I walked into the courtroom. And the judge appeared to be bored with my presence, within the first 30 seconds. And he was actually so rude to me and so full of contempt towards me that I realized, sorry, I moved the camera. I realized from the outset that I wasn't going to get compensation, basically within the first 5 minutes of the hearing. I realized he had a problem with me. I realized something was wrong. I felt that I was being set up. I also think that I was asked to attend a court hearing because they planned to jail me. I think that someone had told the judge and the respondent's lawyer that I was lying and that the things that I was alleging were made up, and that they told me I had to attend the court hearing for my compensation hearing because they wanted to question me on the stand and because they wanted to catch me out because they wanted to jail me for lying in court. And I think that I was set up. And I don't know why they were stupid enough to believe that. And more to the point, they didn't seem in the least bit curious about whether or not my evidence was true. And they didn't seem interested in listening to what I had to say. And they didn't seem interested in actually considering the photos and my testimony and the videos as a whole in order to ascertain whether or not I was telling the truth. It seemed to me that they had already made up their mind before I entered the courthouse that I was lying, and they were willing to put me through a whole day hearing with the same mindset, unwilling to consider my evidence and to get to the end of the hearing and slap me down and say that my compensation application was refused. So basically, I was set up again, apart from being set up to, apart from the allegations about me being mentally ill and trying to set me up to, have me admitted into a mental hospital, it appears that I was being set up to be jailed as well. So I was asked to go on the stand at around 10 a.m. And I was questioned very aggressively by both the judge, who was diagonally opposite me, and the respondent's lawyer, who was sort of in front of me, all day. And sometimes they questioned me one after the other. The respondent's lawyer would question me, and then the judge would question me. And I was actually turning my head from one to the other, answering questions. And sometimes I couldn't even hear the judge's question because he would blurt it out so quickly after the respondent's barrister had asked me a question. Just 1 minute. And it went on and on and on, just one question after another. And their behaviour was really bad at that hearing, and my behaviour was bad as well because of everything that I had gotten to, and because I realised in the first 5 minutes that I wasn't going to get compensation. It was a setup. And because I had been yelled at before, and because the judge failed to call out what the respondent's lawyer was doing to me. The respondent's lawyer tried yelling at me in that court hearing in the same way he did it in the other one, but in this court hearing, I actually yelled back. So that might look bad to anyone who hasn't listened to my story, or to anyone who didn't know that he yelled at me previously, but I'm sure you'll understand why I did that on that day. And the other thing is that they were so pompous that when the respondent's lawyer yelled at me, that was accepted and no one batted an eyelid. And when I yelled back, it was, oh, you're yelling, and yet he was allowed to do it to me. It's very strange. So I was questioned like that for the whole day, and they asked me several things which were obviously to try to catch me out, and that was, it was funny. And it was pathetic, and it was clearly, they were trying to set me up. They tried to catch me out. They questioned me over and over and over again, and I was literally on the stand for the whole day. And they were rude to me for the whole day. And and the whole time this was going on, the respondent was actually sitting there smirking. He got the pleasure of watching me being ripped to shreds by both the judge and his lawyer, and that went on for the whole day. So at the end of the day, and when they were unable to catch me out because I was telling the truth, which is unfortunate for them, they didn't award me compensation. They may have realised that I was telling the truth at the end of the hearing, but instead of apologising and wiping the egg off their face and doing the right thing and awarding me compensation, they remained with their original goal at the outset, which was to deny me compensation, and they did. So after everything that had happened to me, all the violence that I suffered, the poverty that I suffered, the malnutrition, the illness, living in fear, not being able to leave my home, not being able to talk to people about it, not being able to talk to people in general for many reasons. At the end of all that, and after spending thousands and thousands of dollars of my own money preparing my case, printing things out, printing out photos, writing up documents, going online, looking for help, going to see lawyers to ask them to represent me, putting my daughter in after school care so she could avoid this sort of situation, which I unknowingly put her in. Again, if I had any idea that I would be treated so badly at my compensation hearing, there's no way I would have, brought my daughter to it, obviously. But, you know, after all of that, the judge said my application was refused. And he didn't just refuse my application. He did so after aggressively questioning me in front of my daughter for the whole day after being rude to me and after treating me like an inconvenience and after, trying to catch me out without considering my evidence because I don't believe he properly considered my evidence. Um, After all of that, he refused my application and he didn't just say, your application for compensation is refused. He claimed that my application for compensation was concocted in order to extract money out of the respondent. And the main problem with that is obviously my evidence wasn't concocted because I was telling the truth and I had enough evidence to show that I was telling the truth. But the thing is that I thought that when you make an application for compensation, that it is the Victorian state government who pays you out the compensation. I never wanted money from that man. And if I knew that it was money to be coming from him, I never would have applied because it's a civil hearing where you actually get money out of the person. But this wasn't a civil hearing. This was a VOCAT hearing, which is quite different. So he vehemently and nastily and rudely, you know, he disgustingly accused me of making up my evidence in order to get money out of the respondent, who's an individual. And I wasn't even aware that my application for compensation was against him. I thought it was against the state. Okay. And on that subject, I think I have more than enough evidence to sue the state for various failings and because of what happened to me in government housing. And it is very strange. It's very strange that I couldn't find a lawyer to represent me when I have such overwhelming evidence. You know, you have to ask yourself why a lawyer would refuse to represent a woman in my circumstance who has that much evidence, because it would be an easy case for them. I had so much evidence and I had prepared it so well that they could easily take it to court, and I think that I could easily get compensation. But I didn't. So the end result of all the hard work that I put in and everything that I went through was that I got absolutely nothing. And the impression that I got was that the judge wanted it that way and he wanted it to be as painful as possible for me. He could have politely said to me, Miss Taylor, your application for compensation was refused, but he didn't. It was very emotional, it was very biased, it was very nasty. And like, I don't even know how to describe it. I mean, he put a lot of passion into telling me that my application was refused. It was a slap down. The impression that I got was that he felt that I shouldn't have been in the courtroom, that I had no right to be in the courtroom, and he wanted to make sure I didn't go back to the courtroom. And I get that sort of thing a lot. There are many people who work in the justice system who see me as being beneath them. And clearly, if I'm beneath them, then that is how they see other people. They have very set ideas about who can and can't get compensation. And it was very much like it wasn't the Melbourne Magistrates Court, it was the Melbourne Magistrates Cubbyhouse. I felt like the poor kid who had broken into a group of elitist nasty rich kids cubby house, and they were beating the crap out of me because they wanted to make sure I didn't go back again. That is how it felt. They behaved with complete contempt for me. They behaved with complete contempt for justice, because if they had any respect for justice, they would have considered my evidence, and they would have considered it in the same way that they consider evidence that is presented to them by people that they see as being good enough to be in the courthouse. They went out of their way to make sure that I knew that they thought I was beneath them and that I never should have been in the courthouse in the first place. They weren't willing to consider my evidence because of who I was in society. They didn't care that they had done the wrong thing because they knew that I had no way of coming forward and making things right. They knew that I had no one to talk to when things went wrong. They knew I couldn't defend myself, and they took advantage of that. The respondent's lawyer took advantage of my ignorance of the law in many occasions throughout that whole ordeal. And they also spoke unnecessarily in legal jargon. You know, there's no reason for a lawyer to say that he wants further and better particulars. He can just say, I need the evidence. There was no reason for all the show. There was no reason to keep me in the courthouse for a whole day. They could have allowed me to present my case and politely refuse me, but they didn't. They didn't want to be polite. They wanted to make a point. And I think they were making a political point, and that was that the likes of me should not think that I am capable or worthy of presenting a case in their courthouse. The impression that I got from them was that they felt that I was invading their space. I got the impression that they were comfortable in where they were and what they were doing, and they didn't want it to be done any other way. They didn't want to know that the likes of me were telling the truth. They didn't want to know that I could present a case in a competent manner. They didn't want to know that that I deserved compensation, and they didn't want to know that they had misjudged me. And they didn't want to wipe the egg off their face, and they didn't want to apologize, and they didn't want to make things right. They want to do things underhanded. And the way the what I mean by that is that since I've come forward and started telling my story, some people have tried to approach me. Some people have said, you know, I get a lot of psychological menacing, and the main methods of psychological menacing that I get is that people walk up to me and threaten me. People do that to me all the time. And what they say is, we're going to destroy you. I know a few people that want to talk to you. So and so wants to talk to you. So and so, you know, you did this, you did that, blah, blah, blah. People that I've never met just walk up to me and threaten me like that. And these are the people that accuse me of being mentally ill. And that's how they behave. They say that they want to talk to me. And as I've told you before, I have a problem with public servants and other people wanting to ring me on mobile phones instead of emailing me, where I would have evidence of what they're saying and what they're asking me, and you know, I'd have a reasonable opportunity to respond to them. They want to catch me off guard, and they want to catch me in an informal manner, and they want to say what they want to say if and when they want to say it. Some of these people in the justice system have claimed that they have wanted to talk to me, but the fact is they have my mailing address and they have my email address, and if they have anything to say to me, all they need to do is write it out. We know they can write because they've completed law degrees. And I know they can write because they wrote out a refusal for compensation. All they need to do is write out a letter, dear Miss Taylor, blah, 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 post it to me or email it to me. It's that simple. They claim they want to talk to me, and they claim I'm refusing to speak to them, and I'm not. I'm not refusing to communicate with anyone. If anyone wants to communicate with me, they can write to me or they can email me. So, in other words, I'm willing to speak to people if they are willing to do things the right way. I'm not interested in people coming up to me and threatening me. I'm not interested in people coming up to me and saying, we're going to destroy you or blah, blah, blah. You know, don't come up behind me and talk into the back of my head because you think that you can intimidate me out of making videos like these. Try writing me a letter and spelling out anything that you want to say and give me the opportunity to respond to that. I think I deserve that after everything that I've been through. So I was questioned for the whole day. I was questioned aggressively. The judge and the respondent's lawyer were rude to me. The respondent got to sit there and enjoy watching the whole thing. My daughter didn't enjoy watching the whole thing, and I didn't enjoy being there. The judge claimed my application was concocted. It wasn't. I was telling the truth. But after a whole day of, being beaten down by these two bullies, I felt like I was winded. Like I literally, physically felt like I was winded. And I didn't have, much psychological feeling after that stage because I had been completely and utterly drained by trying to tell my case, by trying to defend myself against their attack. And because of how shocked I was at how badly I was being treated in that courthouse, despite the fact that this was a compensation hearing. But I had to go after all of that. When the hearing was over, I had to get my daughter, comfort her. I had to pack up my stuff. I had to wait for them to leave because that's the game that was played in the courthouse. I always had to stand away from the door and allow them to enter first and get comfortable and set things up and talk to who they wanted to talk to and say who they wanted to say. And then I was able to, enter. And then at leaving, I had to wait for them to pack up and for them to comfortably leave before I did so. And then when I was outside the courtroom, I had to wait for them to get the elevator and I had to stand away from them. And when they got the elevator and when they were comfortable, probably, in their comfortable car or wherever they were, I was able to get in the elevator and I was able to go downstairs and I was able to exit the courthouse, at which point I had to walk to the tram or the train or wherever I was going and then go home. And when I went home after that hearing, I had nothing. And I had nothing to say, I had nothing to do, I had nowhere to go, and I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. Mainly because I was, in shock and because I was in debt, and I was in debt because I'd taken out so many loans in order to cover everything that had happened to me. And I'd promised my daughter a holiday. I knew that if I got the stupidest, worst judge on earth, I'd get a couple of $1,000 compensation because, it was obvious I was telling the truth and I had so much evidence. And I promised that I would take her on holiday because I needed so many other things and I needed to pay my debts and I needed to make my home more secure and I needed to do the washing and I needed to fill up the fridge. But I didn't intend to do any of those things. All I intended to do was to go away and to go on holiday just so we could be together and so we could be happy and so we could be safe and so we could be in an environment where these people who had treated us so badly were not around. But I didn't get to do that. So that is, what happened to me at the court hearing. And what I intend to do is to tell you what I did after the court hearing, because I didn't get, I didn't get any money, and I didn't get justice, and I didn't get listened to, and I didn't get treated fairly, but I still kept going. I didn't keep going through the court system, but I kept going through other ways. So I hope you guys enjoyed my series. The series itself isn't over, but this is the last video regarding all of those incidents. Now that we've done this video, I'll be able to go into videos where I talk about other things that have been done to me, mainly by the police, because they have done other things to me, and I'll do my best to prove those as well. And I want to talk about what I did to try to help myself um, after I came to realize that I wasn't going to get any help through the courts.